We want to appear logical to ourselves. We want to appear logical to other people, right? So there's two parts to our decision making. We are emotional on the one side. We get invaded by emotional forces. We get steered by them. But at the same time, we want to appear logical. So here's an experiment that was done by Chris Shee at the University of Chicago, where he gave people two chocolates to choose from, right? One, he said, is a big chocolate, but it looks like a cockroach, right? Another is a much smaller chocolate, but it doesn't look like a cockroach. It looks like a regular chocolate. Which one would you choose, right? Now, it's very disgusting, even if you imagine putting this cockroach into your mouth, right? I mean, it's disgusting. And so at an emotional level, you shouldn't be choosing that cockroach, even though it's a bigger chocolate. But at the rational level, you override that emotion and tell yourself that, look, I mean, I shouldn't be stupid. It's a chocolate after all. What does it matter how it looks like? I should go for the bigger piece. Particularly if other people are going to ask you which one did you choose, because you want to appear to them as being rational as opposed to an emotional person. And so it turns out that people end up choosing that cockroach chocolate and then they puke, right? Because they can't swallow it. It's just disgusting to put it in your mouth. He's done a bunch of experiments like this to show that we have an emotional tug, but at the same time we override it and want to appear rational and so on. So what the conclusion is, and I'm going to show you one experiment that I've done myself. This is in the context of dating. Let's say that you go on this thing called speed date. I don't know if it's come to India, but you go and you meet people for about 2 minutes each, 20 people, 40 minutes. And then at the end of it, you say, okay, I want to date, person number 1, 3, and 5. And likewise, the opposite side, they say, I want to date this person, that person, and X, Y, and Z. And so if there's a match, both parties want to meet each other, then they go out on a date, right? Let's say that you go on a date like that, and before you go on a date like that, you are asked to list all the important things for you. What are you looking for in your mate? And let's say that you're looking for somebody who is very smart and very witty. Romantic is less important, right? And you go on the date, and you meet these two people. It turns out that this guy is far better looking than this guy, right? I mean, most people would agree with that. Bradley Cooper, of course. And it turns out he's not that smart or witty, a little bit dumb even, let's say, but he's very romantic. Now, what's going to happen after you meet them to your priorities? Which is more important now? Is it romance or is it how smart or witty your potential partner is? It turns out that we change our relative weights. So before going to the hurry date or speed dating, we thought that, the women thought that being smart and witty is more important, but after it turns out that they end up rating being romantic as more important. So this happens time and again. In fact, happened to my wife and I. When we were looking for a house to buy, we wanted to buy a house in a neighborhood that had a very good school district because we were going to have kids and so on and so forth. And then we fell in love, absolutely in love with this house that, did not belong to a very good school district at all. And then we went back home and we started kind of telling ourselves, when are we going to have kids? Really, I mean, think about it. We could even be impotent, No, we didn't really say that. But so we ended up choosing this house, and basically the way that we rationalized it to ourselves is to tell ourselves that, look, I mean, by the time the kid is ready to go to school, it'll be another 5 years. We don't even have a kid. So what are we worrying about? Let's go ahead and buy this house. So this is what happens all the time, over and over and over again, that our emotions make our decisions, and then we recruit our rationality to justify our emotionally made decisions. Okay, so that's the idea. And if you combine these two aspects which are very important for human decision making, first of all, that we make decisions based on emotions, and secondly, we have a need to rationalize. What it means is that companies that somehow make their products or their appeals very emotionally appealing, but that they don't stop with that. They also provide rational reasons for why it is that you should buy the product, right? So they kind of undercut the rational arguments, counter arguments you might make against buying the product by giving you good rational reasons, but their main appeal, their platform is the emotional appeal. So if you look at Apple, for example, that's a well-known example of a company that does that very successfully over and over again. So let me show you a very quick ad. I'm sure that a lot of you guys have seen this. It's an ad that did not air on TV but came on, on the internet of Google. So if you could play that ad, really appreciate it. Where is the gentleman who's going to play the videos?
ये मैं ये यूसुफ लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था। उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने। रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ के दुकान से जजरिया चुरा के खानी।
जजरिया?
मेरा साहब नमस्ते। नमस्ते। मेरी पोती मुंबई वाली।
नमस्ते।
बचपने की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
फाजिल स्वीट्स।
हाँ जी। दादाजान, दिल्ली से किसी की कॉल है।
हेलो,
यूसुफ अंकल।
कौन?
जी मैं सुमन बोल रही हूँ दिल्ली से, आपके बचपन के दोस्त बलदेव जी की पोती। याद है बचपन में आप दोनों झझरिया चुरा के खाते थे?
बचपने की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे एक पतंग सा उड़ता था परिंदों की तरह परिंदों की तरह परिंदों की तरह एक दौर था मन मन मोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था
पार्टीशन के वक्त हम रातों रात हिंदुस्तान आ गए।
दादू
यूसुफ जी बड़ी याद आती है।
कागजों की कश्तियों में डूबा रहता था झांकती खिड़कियों में उलझा रहता था वो भी क्या दौर था मन पे न जोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था एक दौर था मन मन मोर था
भैया थोड़ा जल्दी।
हाँ जी, कौन? हैप्पी बर्थडे यारा। यूसुफ, ओए यूसुफ, बल्लू, ओए, यूसुफ यार।
So this emotional appeal, right? I mean, it's so important, and it can very easily short-circuit any rational counter-arguments that you might have. And if you can somehow make the offerings that you have more emotionally appealing, and I've just come up with 3 kind of strategies here, if you will, but I'm sure you can think of many more. One of them is to have, particularly for the high net worth investors, to have somebody very high profile from your company go and meet them directly, you know, make that kind of one-to-one connection, human-to-human connection, which would be, I think, very, very important and could very easily be very effective. The second one, which is, of course, used a lot in many industries, is to wine and dine people. You know, it's called the affect heuristic or the liking heuristic. If you like something or somebody, then you end up justifying your decision and finding ways to justify your decision, even if you don't have very, very good rational reasons for it. I've heard, so I put this thing up before I heard that you can't use celebrity endorsers, which is another way in which you could potentially go about doing it, but of course it's moot out here in this particular case. Okay, so let me just move on. The second big obstacle is unfamiliarity. And what do you do when people are not very familiar with mutual funds? You know, there's a fear of unfamiliar things. When my daughter was about 6 months old, we put her in a daycare. And we put it in a daycare that we were not familiar with because the daycare that my son went to, who was older, did not have any room. And so we put her on the waiting list in that daycare, and then we put her in this new daycare. And every day we would be like, you know, this is bad. We don't know what is going on in this daycare. We don't know if we like it, and so on and so forth. And over time, what happened is that we actually grew to like the daycare. And then there came a point when the old daycare where my son went to actually had room for her, but by then we had gotten familiar with this new daycare, and so it became a bit of a problem. You know, two relatively desirable alternatives. How are we going to decide? So familiarity is a very, very important thing, and if you don't have it, then it can lower the chances of patronizing an option or buying a particular product. Here's another study in the context of vacations, where a person who had just taken a test was asked, let's say that you failed the test, okay? Would you be willing to go on a vacation to Hawaii? And they said, yeah, you know, if I failed the test, you know, I studied really hard for it. I think I really deserve it. So I think that I will go on the vacation. I'll come back, batteries recharged, and I'll study again, maybe take the exam again. Then the same person was asked, okay, let's imagine that you've actually passed the test. Would you take the vacation? And they said, yeah, of course I would take the vacation because I deserve this vacation now, right? Because I've earned it. So then they asked, either if you fail or you pass, you want to take the vacation, so why don't we book the vacation right now? And she said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to know first why it is that I'm going on the vacation before I'm willing to book the vacation, right? So the idea that you need to have clarity, and the familiarity gives clarity, and that becomes very, very important. Here's another really interesting study that, they had blood pressure monitors on people, and they kind of monitored the blood pressure as they went about their daily activities. And blood pressure is the highest when you meet the so-called frenemies, who are like friends but also enemies. I'm sure everybody has some people like that, maybe a neighbor, right? You kind of have a love-hate relationship with. So when you meet your enemies, your blood pressure is actually a little bit lower because you know what it is that you want to do with them, maybe ignore them or shout at them. But frenemies, it becomes very confusing, and so the lack of clarity also becomes a reason for the stress. Okay, so familiarity is very important, and one way in which you could potentially overcome it, the fact that people are unfamiliar with your products, is to get them in touch with other people who are familiar with the product, right? So you kind of start a reference kind of scheme almost, like you ask your current customers, and it turns out that people who are current customers of mutual funds have very positive attitudes towards them, right? So that's a good thing. And so you can ask them to make the products familiar to their friend circles, right? Maybe you can have a kitty party of sorts. I'm not sure if this would work. So let me show you this really quick video on how important it is for us to conform to other people, right? To mimic other people. And so if I'm invited to a party in which this guy that I really appreciate and admire tells me that, look, I have these mutual funds, I own these funds, and this is how much I've invested in them, they're really good instrument, then chances are I would want to mimic them. Okay, so let me show you this funny video. I want to stop like after about 30 seconds of it, but let's see it for 30 seconds.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall.
Let's go on. Let's see the second part of this too. Keep going.
Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before.
Okay, so let's stop it there. So we have a very strong desire to mimic other people. We are highly social creatures, perhaps the most social creature there is. And so we really care about what other people think of us, and it comes out in many different ways, including the desire to mimic other people. So a very, very perhaps easy way in which you can get a lot of people who are unfamiliar currently with mutual funds to be receptive towards them is to get people who are already receptive towards them, your existing customers, and get them to market it for you. Could I have the slides up? The second one is something called the IKEA effect. I don't know to what extent this might actually be applicable in this case, but my 401k plan in the United States is through Fidelity, and I have a Fidelity account, and I can go in there, and then I can basically change my allocation. It's at my fingertips. Basically, anytime I want to do it, I can do it. And I take ownership that way of my allocations, and of course, I feel bad if it tanks, right? But I also feel very good if it succeeds. And when people put something together themselves, they're so invested in it, even though it might actually be a very bad product. In the case of Nike, for example, there's a website where you can go and co-create or create a particular look. And some of the looks that people create are hideous. They put orange and blue together. It doesn't really go well, but they love it themselves because they put it together, right? So giving people an opportunity to kind of actually do it themselves might also kind of get them to become a little more familiar with the product and play with it and start liking it. And the last one is to use